Well, welcome everybody to episode number 12 of the Merc at Work podcast. Today we have Mark Byerly joining us. He works with us here at Merc, and just wanted to kind of have a technology roundtable, give him an opportunity to share some things about what he's doing with our Arrivo capital planning platform, and just discuss some of the trends in healthcare consulting and what some of these terms that are being thrown around are, and just give it a little bit more of a technology deep dive so that listeners can understand those things. So, Kobe, Mark, welcome.
Yeah, Kyle, it's always great to be back after 2 weeks of having, technical difficulties. It's great to be here, especially having Mark, our tech guru. Could have used him for the past 2 weeks, but Mark, glad to have you, man.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, did you guys have a good Easter weekend?
Yeah, it was great on my end. I mean, it's hard to beat, some good weather, a round of golf with the family, going to church, eating a good lunch. Can't beat that.
It's true, Mark.
Yeah, I second what Kobe said. It sounds like we had identical Easter weekends.
Yeah, I that makes three of us. It was actually very, very similar for myself. And Saturday actually won a fun golf tournament with a friend of mine from church. So it's that it was a good weekend on all accounts. So anyway, let's jump right in. Mark, give us a little bit of your background. I know you're pretty newly graduated from college, but tell us a little bit about your degree and what that all entails, and some of the things you're working on now with Merck, like Arrivo, and the launches of 2.0 and 2.1 and those things.
Yeah, of course. No, so I graduated from Indiana University East here in Richmond, Indiana, with a degree in informatics. And informatics essentially describes the field with interacting with computers, how humans and computers interact with each other. And I didn't know exactly where I was going to go with that. I've always liked development and programming, software development, and I actually had done an internship in my senior year with a hospital, a Reed Hospital here in Richmond, and so that uniquely prepared me for going into the medical space. So I Merck reached out in May, I believe, and I signed on in July. So having that background for at least a year doing tech support and walking all over the hospital, fixing different issues and things like that definitely helped prepare me for some of the unique challenges that the medical field faces. So now I've
Yeah,
been with Merck for nine months.
yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
You're going to
And
be a veteran now.
right. Um, so yeah, just been working on Arrivo, the capital planning tool, doing a lot of the development and even before that the proof of concepts and getting things to show both you, Kyle, and Wade, to kind of show what it could look like before even development started. So
Yeah, and I think you're being humble in some ways, because you one of the things that really kind of took place is you took it to task to almost rebuild it from the previous platform onto what it is now. I know you're working with development consultant as well, but you just jumped right in and said, "Hey, let's rebuild this to something that we can really function well with." So um, that again, kudos for that, and we're excited about where it's going.
Yeah, absolutely.
So cool. Well, maybe share a couple little things about Arrivo, some of the features or things that you've been excited about. I know we've got some prediction tools in there and different layouts and stuff, data and analytics. But maybe highlight a couple things that you've enjoyed working on or you think are bring a lot of value.
Yeah. Um, I it might not sound very exciting to some people maybe, but some of the just the ways that data is displayed, figuring out how to how to set up filters and list the data, the different pieces of equipment out in a way that someone could just take a glance at the page and have a good idea of um, maybe the condition of the particular assets that are being displayed. And if it's a sea of red, make that's kind of a tip off that maybe things are going a little south. Um, but figuring out ways to make it as easy as possible for customers and users to very very quickly see the condition and the state of their particular assets, and figuring all that out has been an ongoing process, but it's
Yeah, I
quite
know
fun.
we've had discussions on some of our other podcasts about how data tells a story, and really that's what you're trying to do is put the technology to work to tell the story of the data and allow the users to just simply look at it and get that story and understand it quickly and efficiently, and so that they can use that data and save money and do the planning and budgeting and all those kind of things to really help their facilities. So no, I'm 100%.
Yeah, the less the user has to do in terms of figuring out how to connect to different points of data, the better. The more that we can provide the all the connection points and just hand it to the user and have it all packaged right
Yeah.
there is that's the challenge.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's truly providing a service, because then it's we're always thinking. I know you and Kobe and myself and Wade and everybody on the team is just always thinking of ways to better display those stories that data tells and simplify it and make it to where what a Revo is today, it's better tomorrow, it's better the next day. Like it's a constant process, but it's exciting at the same time.
Yep.
So let's dive in. We've got a few questions for you. Us,
Yeah.
Kobe and I aren't really the tech guru that you are. So let's jump in. We wanted to talk a little bit about some trends in the industry and some of those things that are terminology that's going on out there, and just allow somebody who, even though you're young, like you have a lot of wisdom on this stuff. So, Kobe, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so Mark, I mean, I see this every day on LinkedIn. There's tons of talk about AI right now in healthcare. Even with consulting services, similar to what we do. And for me personally, I know to also like the typical mind, we don't really understand AI. And I was wondering if you could maybe give us a deeper understanding of, what AI is and how it's driven.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely not going to be all the way the full iceberg of AI. That's for sure. This probably would be days worth, but
Yeah.
um, yeah. Yeah, of course. Well, I think a good way of um, categorizing maybe AI or yeah, categorizing AI would be to describe it as it is a way of coming up with algorithms and forming connections within data. So a long-standing approach was you had a bunch of data that you needed to get through, and maybe ways to classify. Let's say you're building a spam detection engine, something like that, and you could go through and figure out rules, hard set, defined rules that this is spam, this isn't spam, and maybe you have a 90% success rate, 85% success rate, something like that. Um, AI, or in this case, more machine learning, which is a subset of AI, um, comes along and you feed it the raw text of each email that you get. You just, you know, grab that and put it in as input and label it. This is spam, this isn't spam. And then the computer takes that input and will form its own rules, its own way of detecting how spam is defined. Like, this is spam, this is not spam. And it has its own rule set. And it's way more complex. It can be way more complex than anything a human could ever. It could be looking at, a particular character value that a human that doesn't make any sense. Um, the length of the email or something like that. Um, and it allows it, the longer and longer, the more input you feed it, the more accurate it becomes because it keeps refining those rules. So that's kind of the beginnings of AI, and then it's just snowballed until we've got things like Chat GPT and Mid Journey and things like that that are called generative AIs, which are not classifying incoming input; they are actually creating things based on all the data sets that have been fed into the AI.
So on the creative part like that, are they going out into the internet worlds and basically you ask, Chat GPT, write me an essay about, the history of classical music, and it goes and searches the internet really quick. Is that how that works? And it puts together let's say you gave it 1,000 words, it gives you 1,000. It puts those parameters out based upon the algorithms that go into it and what it's able to search. Is that correct?
Um, for some things, it would be using the internet. Um, and I'm not sure the extent of that exactly, but for certain things, like if you asked about something in history, describe to a 5-year old how, like, what happened with the moon landing. Well, it's going to search that and compile a whole bunch of different sources. But for something like writing an essay or a story or something like that, it has a somehow, either by searching the internet or being fed by all the people over at OpenAI, um, it's been fed, examples of essay and written speech and stories and all sorts of stuff like that.
Gotcha.
Whether it's been, just given free access to the internet to find those, or it's been explicitly given, this is what an essay looks like, and this is what a story looks like by the people over there.
Gotcha.
Um, and then it's able to combine all those different sources and figure out the different patterns that are being used. Therefore is used here, and then it goes into this sort of part of speech, and it doesn't understand English. It doesn't understand the how we speak English, but it understands rules and patterns,
Yeah.
and then is able to put it all together.
So as much as people say that it's, machine learned, or it's these machines have these brains and things like that, there is still a heavy human element to this because it's been programmed to do this, or it's been given examples, or it's been given data in order to do these kind of things.
Yeah. Yeah, the data has to come from somewhere, and obviously the structure of the model or the engine or the algorithm, whatever people want to call it, it has to come from somewhere. Someone has to describe that
Yeah.
this is the layout and the structure of this thing's brain for all intents and purposes. Um, and then the data has to come from somewhere, and we're getting to a point, unfortunately, where it's becoming
Uh,
cyclical, where the things that AI is pushing out, like let's say AI writes a article, and then that's published by a blog writer, and then later down the line AI is scraping the internet and it pulls that blog article. Well, AI generated content is going right back into the engine to generate more, and we're
and it's the same thing.
yeah, it just starts becoming a loop. And once AI generated content becomes so ubiquitous on the internet, it will it, most of the data that's going back into the engine will probably be AI generated. So it
Wow.
just becomes one big loop.
Yeah. I
Wow.
mean,
So who knows what the outcome of that will be, because we're kind of not
yeah,
necessarily to the point, because a lot of the stuff still on the internet is largely human,
yeah,
especially a lot of the front facing. Maybe a lot of the stuff you don't really see. It's on the third page of Google or something, might be, but you'd like to think that a lot of the major news publications are still mostly human
that's
written.
that's really interesting and takes me down a whole bunch of different rabbit holes. One of the things that I had heard, and I think this is exactly what you just described, is somebody said AI and machine learning is only as good as the algorithm that the human that created the the algorithm and the process. It's only as good as that is. So again, we look at these things as like the answer to, and sometimes as the solution to fix our problems, and in reality it's still somebody behind the scenes, kind of creating that, and there's a human mind allowing this computer mind to work. So no,
Very
that,
dependent on data as well.
yeah,
The AI only knows what it's being fed in terms of data.
yeah,
So especially it becomes very apparent in things like generative AIs. Like if you only give it pictures of dogs, it will only be able to generate a picture of a dog. That's all the pattern that I mean, it could try. You might be able to get something of grass, but it's not going to look, if you ask it to generate a forest, it doesn't know what that is. It's
yeah.
only been given pictures of dogs. Same with if ChatGPT only had gotten essays written about the American Civil War, and then you ask it to write about the space race between us and Russia. Like it, it'll try. It knows maybe how to write something in English and it'll be readable, but it won't have any information on that. Um,
No,
so it's very dependent, especially in the generative, but even in the classification, like I said about spam detection, if you only gave it spam emails or only gave it like 15, five spam emails and 10 regular emails, it's not going to be that accurate just because it doesn't have a lot of data points to consider.
gotcha.
So
No, that
very
makes,
very dependent on AI. Even if the model is super powerful, you just don't give it anything. It's not going to work terribly well.
yeah. Now that kind of segues into some of my thoughts, and we're obviously the work that we do is revolves around medical equipment and inventories and consulting. And what are some of the things that you could see as limitations? We're starting to hear about things like AI and certain tools that utilize technology to do some of the consulting services. But what are some of the limitations? Obviously data is. It's like you maybe sit and say, hey, let's try and perform an inventory with some sort of AI or some sort of product that just scours the internet. But obviously data is a limitation. But what are some of the things that you could see as a limitation to just jumping right into a product like that you know um, is kind of trying to perform a consulting service?
Yeah. Um, well, I think I might actually back up and just give maybe a couple examples of where AI maybe could be have its more beneficial area
Hmm.
in healthcare, and that would be probably not in the generative side, but the classification side or the predictive side, where you have a mountain of data that you may want to extract certain features from certain trends or anomalies in that data, but going through hundreds of thousands of data points is not really something for a human to do. So you could give that to a model or an engine, AI engine, and have it extract certain features. And even it might be able to identify trends that a human just would not think of.
Hmm.
Some correlation between the data by just looking at it and identifying patterns. So that's one place that I can see being AI being beneficial,
Yeah.
and then even predicting based on the data that it's given, then it can predict a few years or inventories or whatever, or particular courses of action based on that data,
Yeah.
based on past courses of action and how those panned out just by looking at the data. So
But
that would
then,
be
yeah.
yeah.
But then going and almost like creating the data in your mind, would that be a limitation then to sit and rely upon AI or something to sit and say, go and tell me what all of this is, like an inventory or something like that?
Yeah, so something like doing an inventory with AI um, assistance would, with the or the image and object classification that we have right now, because people have built models that you hold up an orange and it'll say, well, right here is an object and I think I have 95% confidence that it is an orange, and then you hold up something else and here's an object and I have a 95% confidence that it's an iPad or something like that.
Yeah.
And those have been, I mean, they've been tested for going on 15 years at least, um, of doing things like that. But in order to have an accurate model to do an inventory with that it recognizes objects, it would have to be extensively trained on medical equipment
Yeah.
and that only. So I personally don't know of any or any models that are like that have that kind of capability.
And then
Um,
what would that, um, you know, like you said, kind of a lack of data? What about things like, um, understanding the vintage of the equipment? Obviously, if it didn't understand the amount of equipment, wouldn't it be very difficult for it to understand its like life or how old it is or what era it came from? Let's say it's a 2001 piece of equipment versus the same type of model from the same manufacturer that's from 2021. Would, is there a way that it would be able to let's say it did have the data, would there be a, some sort of limitation that maybe it could identify the piece, but how would it know its vintage?
Yeah. And I'm assuming you're talking about just maybe taking a picture of it or something along those lines.
Yeah.
How would it be able to extract that? Um, yeah, that would be very difficult, especially if the pieces looked similar, because the way that object recognition or image classification works with AI is it's just identifying patterns, and it really can never be 100% sure unless it's seen that exact picture before. Um, so it's just identifying patterns and shapes and even looking deeply into the image pixel by pixel and things like that. So if two C arms or whatever look very similar to each other and they're 10 years apart, there's a good chance that it'll either be divided. If it knows about both of them, it'll be divided. Well, maybe it could be this 50% sure, and or
Yeah.
it could be this 50% sure. Or it'll just take a guess, and the first one that it came up with was this one, and it says, "Oh, I'm 95% sure it's this," and it's actually the other.
Yeah.
But the shape, based on shape and color and everything that it's been trained on, it's reason it's normally a very reasonable result that it comes up with. You're not sitting there like, how on earth can it be? It's like, no, it's a C arm, it makes sense. It's
Yeah.
the shape, it's the color, but it doesn't.
Like the
It
down to
might,
the detail accuracy is missing.
Yeah.
yeah, and certain models, certain with enough training might be able to make that distinction. Um, I know that a common thing to do is have a dogs versus cats classification, and it's two very different looking animals. It's able to tell the difference, but I don't know if they've done a lot of things with, say, different dog breeds that might cause it some trouble, especially if it's two white dog breeds or two brown, but this different breed, and it has to really look into the details. I don't know if that would be sort of an adjacent a test if a model could differentiate that. Um, but yeah, especially if there's no identifying features and they have the same front facing model number written in big letters across the front and everything, and you wouldn't really know until you looked at a particular part of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it'd be very difficult for a model to for AI to differentiate those.
I even think about, the serial numbers and things that,
Yeah.
they're on the back of the piece of equipment, or it's, underneath, or, you kind of have to, you know, dig around to find it. Like there'd be no way to get that real descriptive, identifier with just a simple approach that's like, hey, what is this piece of equipment?
And even having a picture or a video of that serial number, in a lot of cases you might be able to extract it. I mean, there's plenty of programs that will recognize text in an
Yeah.
image, but there's some that's just engraved into a steel plate, and
Yeah.
image detect or text detection algorithms and AI is just gonna struggle mightily with that.
Yeah.
Um, where a human has to kind of guess at what the numbers are on the plate or something like that. A machine is it's gonna be hopeless
Yeah.
um, to do
Yeah, I
that.
even think as well as far as like pieces being on top of a tower. Like you go inside of an OR and there's a tower and it's hard to get to some of those serial numbers. Or maybe you may look at a model number and it may be scratched off a little bit, like how you said with the metal plates. And AI, mean, surely they can't recognize that. But they may be able to recognize the cats and dogs, like you said. They may
Yeah.
be able to say, all right, this is an electrical surgical unit, but they don't know the model or they don't know whatever else behind it.
Yeah.
That's what that would be my expectation if I was going to build something or try to get something set up. My expectation would be, can it recognize can it differentiate a surgical unit, electrosurgical unit from a x-ray machine?
Yeah.
That's the level that's my baseline. And I'm happy if it's recognizing the pieces of equipment on maybe a 90 to 95% accuracy. Anything beyond that, where it's getting down to, oh, this is um, I'm blanking on some of the brand names, but um, this is a particular brand of this tower, and it has this brand of surgical unit, this brand of light source, and things like that.
Yeah.
That would impress me if it was able to do that, but especially if I was building something to start out. Did it recognize that it was a C arm versus an overhead light? Like that's the level that I'm at if I was building that.
Yeah. No, I mean, man, it's, you know, just hearing you talk about it just makes you think about so much of it. And here, I just heard on a podcast the other day, they're talking about, AI being able to do sales calls and make very strong, um, responses. They call in and say, hey, I'm are you interested in this product or this service? And then the person says, well, I'm not really sure. And maybe the AI says, it's been trained to say, well, what's holding you back? Or, something like that. And it can go through that. But that whole, your discussion on, quantifying an image and finding the data and the demographic information about a piece of equipment or whatever, I just see, just we're such at the infancy of it being able to do those kind of things successfully. Another thing that just popped into my mind is what happens if you're using some sort of, lens type or camera AI type thing. How safe could that be with, patient data? Like let's say you're walking into an operating room that they're changing over, and up on the board is, the next patient's name and what surgery is going to happen, and are there any issues with HIPAA compliance, using something that's using a video and then scouring the internet? Like, could somebody, for instance, I'm not blaming anybody, but could somebody at OpenAI or whatever be looking at those videos to build out their platform stronger and see something that they're never supposed to have seen?
Yeah, it's really dependent on just how things are set up. I know that there's a push to get AI into healthcare, and that does include things like um, AR, augmented reality, which would be like having some sort of headset where there's a video and then you're overlaying certain things on top of that information, maybe patient information. You walk into a room wearing it, and it would be reading all the patient information, like you'd have it right there um, in your vision, and being able to just pull up things that you want, maybe their diagnosis or the particular doctor
Yeah.
instructions. And you want to have to look at a board or anything like that. Um, and it really depends on where that's where that video is going and how it's being used. Um, if it's just going, if it's almost just being deleted on a 30-second delay or something. Yeah, I honestly, it really just depends on how it's being done, but there are a lot of considerations. If you're recording an entire file and then going to be a video file and then going to be saving that for use later, and it has patient information in it, I don't I don't know about that. Like I don't
Yeah.
know if how the laws would recognize that. I know there are a lot of challenges with all the push, because there's a big push for AI to be in healthcare in multiple different um, in multiple different ways. Like I said, the AR. I know that there's um, things to help, like even surgeons operate
Yeah.
or train, and things like that, where AI can help. But
Yeah, I think as a consultant, it's something that, we're entrusted with what's in there.
yeah,
Um, but, we're trained on, HIPAA compliance, and we understand it's, that what what is there stays there and it doesn't leave. But you kind of are opening up a whole can of worms if, you're using some sort of platform or something that you don't really know where it's going.
hmm yeah. And the other thing is the model would probably be trained to recognize pieces of equipment. So more than likely, it wouldn't care if there was, patient information up there. It just wouldn't recognize that because it's trained just on pieces of equipment. So it's looking for shapes of equipment.
Gotcha.
Um, so in that way, um, it just depends.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I think
it's
you'd have
really
to build
dependent on
in
how
so
the
many.
video is being saved and stored, and the server that it's going to, and if it's being deleted, and
Yeah. I think you
yeah.
just have to build in so many fail safes and different things. We even with Arivo, we've had to discuss with clients and things like that, what the data safety is like and all of that. So I think there's a lot there when you're basically creating something that, like you said, scours the internet or scours like algorithms and programs and pictures and all that. And it's just like, what could this open up to? I don't even know that we all know what it could all open up to. So
Yeah, I kind of think that having something like a live video feed connected to internet access is probably not compliant,
yeah,
because if it would recognize, somehow pull that information, then search it and return who knows what, the patient's information, their Facebook page, whatever, so someone could access it. But if you had a private storage of all of your training data, just completely separate, no, it's not on the internet anywhere, it's in a folder, and that's what it's been trained on, and that's all it accesses when it's trying to pull pieces of equipment. I that might be okay, because even
yeah,
if it would pull the patient information, it wouldn't do anything with it. It couldn't search it or anything like that, because all it's got is pictures of medical equipment or whatever.
yeah,
So
That actually made me kind of think of something, Mark, because typically whenever we go in to do an inventory, a lot of times, there's patients there, things are going on. It's a normal day for them. With a tool like this, could that possibly be the same scenario? I know we've talked about maybe leaking patient information. But if they're like, what if there was no one there? What if they only did this, when there was no one there? What if this only took place whenever patient information could not be leaked? There is no patients there. There is no information, available to be leaked.
yeah, then that would probably be that would probably be okay. Um, which, if the only time it could be used is if the place is completely empty, that presents a bit of a limitation to
yeah,
having that kind of
Yeah.
software. If that's a requirement, it's like you can't use this, because it's not compliant unless it's completely a ghost town in the ASC. So that
and
would
that'd be
that would
really
be quite a big
difficult
limitation.
in an acute care setting because that's a 24-hour operation. You'd have to close an entire hospital down to do that. So that kind of wipes that out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's really dependent on what, like, there's so many different factors of how things could be set up. Because even, you know, if you're walking around with patients, if it's directly connected to the internet, well, it could easily run a facial detection search, like just search that person's photo, and if that photo matches their profile picture, then that returns Facebook, Instagram, something like that. And now you have all those handles in your data, and it's like, well, you know, I can go and search that now. It's right there. I have their profile.
Yeah.
Which again, it's like, well, if it's only giving back medical equipment, it probably wouldn't know what a link is to Instagram, so it probably would ignore it. But it's all those safeguards that would have to be set up, and I don't even know all the different ones that would have to be in place to make something like that HIPAA compliant. So you could walk around with patients and be totally fine.
Yeah. That brings up something else, Mark, is, we do a lot of work in appraisal and understanding the value of medical equipment. So, you know, using some sort of AI or algorithm based platform, um, what are some of the limitations there? I can think of some where it's like you're pulling, pricing information from all over, unreliable sources or what have you. What are some of the things that, you could speak to on that?
Yeah. So giving the AI, and I think this is maybe becoming a theme um, of this discussion, but giving the AI unfettered access to, to the internet um, without direction, yeah, you're gonna get a lot of stuff that you probably don't want, um, especially with something like appraisal. So that is definitely a limitation that I could see. It's just not necessarily that it would return incorrect. It would just be incorrect data. It would just be non-useful data
Yeah.
where it's some huge inflated price or some, lowball kind of price or something
Yeah.
like that, that it just found a price, so it gives you that back, and
Yeah.
it's just not useful. Not that it's incorrect, that was there. It was found on the internet,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's just not useful.
You don't know if it's somebody that's on Craigslist that, found a electrosurgical unit on the side of the road and was like, "Hey, let's see if I can flip this for $10 real quick," or if they're actually, it's a new price from, a manufacturer that listed the MSRP. So
Yeah.
you really, there's a lot of variation that could be out there. And then some sites are auction sites, and so they'll
Hmm.
put a starting bid at $1. So if you got back a C arm on a valuation on an AI or algorithm based valuation that said your $150,000 C arm was worth $1 because that was the data point it found, and it said this is an accurate source, I'm giving it $1. Man, you're not going to be too happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. um don't want to maybe give away all the secrets to everyone that wants to build their own appraisal software, but
Yeah.
if I was thinking about building something like that, one of the things I probably would look into is some sort of labeling, classification, approval, whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
where it not only gets the price, but it tells you where it's from, and then would allow you to say, hey, this is good, keep looking here, or I don't want this price. This is from Craigslist. Like, don't show this to me. And
Yeah.
over time, it would that would steer the algorithm. Hopefully, that
Yeah.
would steer the model to focus on particular sites that match toward verification and things, which would take a lot of other considerations to determine that. But um, letting the user tell the model that they think that this is a good price, or they think that this is one that can be disregarded, would definitely give the model some direction on where to look if it's pulling prices.
Yeah. Well,
So
that's
there's a lot of other considerations that would go into that. But like I said, all
yeah.
those people listening so they can have the instructions to build their own appraisal engine.
No, that's
My
great.
mind's
Like,
already churning and I can already think like man, what happens if a piece is refurbished? Or, I'm just
yeah,
sitting here thinking about all these different
yeah.
possibilities
Does
and
it,
or
you know,
what about the condition of the equipment? Like how do you know is it able to, pick up off a picture whether it's in fair condition or good condition?
yeah,
Like
because that
all of those things.
Kobe, you are exactly right. Like the difference between a piece of equipment that's in excellent condition versus fair condition or good condition, that that dictates the value. And then you have to understand how old it is too. And if it doesn't, you know, that its life cycle is dependent on its value as well. So you're looking at it and you're like, well, yeah, outwardly it looks the same as this one. Well, that one's 5 years old. And then you don't know that because of those 5 years, it's been used a lot more, or they've actually refurbished it 4 years ago. And this one, they look the same because they use the same paint in the refurbishing process, or that one's been a troubled unit and biomeds had to repair 5 or 6 times. There's just so much in that you're just leaning so heavily on an algorithm, and that's it goes back to, well, Mark was talking about that, about building your own kind of platform. It makes me think of our database, and it's like Mark said, it you'd have to almost have some sort of baseline, and that's exactly what we've done with our values database. Um, it's it's accepted values that we've done in 18 years of appraisal. Um, over well over 100,000 lines of data from years of appraising that just says, okay, this is what this is worth. These were accepted numbers. They've been verified. The customer has been content, happy, with what we've done, with the data that we've provided, and then we use that as like a baseline. So having something that just scours and looks from all kinds of open-ended data, um, doesn't give you that real baseline of quality. Like, that's why we go back to, hey, this is one data point of many. We've got the database, we've got secondary market, we've got regression analysis, we've got all these levels of ways to look at a piece of equipment, and doing it AI or algorithm based is like one piece of 10.
Yep. And
So
that's what I mean, you talking about that was another part of, if I'm thinking about some sort of appraisal model, it would definitely have to be some sort of hybrid approach where it's pulling from the database and going out and searching new, but also, having those influences of past appraisals to guide it.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
no,
for sure.
that's awesome. I think what we've learned in all this is that all of this technology and AI and all this, it has its place,
For
but it's
sure.
it's not replacing consulting services or things that expertise and full understanding of equipment and value and life cycle and all these kind of things, and it could be different industries as well. I mean, you could apply this to all kinds of stuff, that it's not just like, hey, let's turn everything over to AI or turn it over to some software platform or something to just go do the job of what real human expertise can accomplish.
And to that point too, yeah, there's no AI without the data.
Yeah,
The data is either the single largest factor in how the AI performs, or very close to being the most important. Um, so either you have to have the whole, like, you were talking about, Kyle, the database of years worth of data,
Yeah.
or you have to have the expertise to go and find your own data, and then you have to make sure it's, you have to comb through it and make sure that it's in the right format, and you have the right indicators present in there. If you get rid of, say you're like, I want to make a model that can, predict whatever, and you just don't think that one of the columns is terribly important in the data. It's like, I don't know what this is used for, and someone else with the knowledge might come through. It's like, that's one of the most important things that determines, whatever you're trying to classify.
Yeah.
And so you just hamstrung the model. Like, there's no way it's going to be able to give you an accurate prediction or classification. It's like, um maybe predicting the condition based off of the year of manufacture or whatever, which there's so many different factors. But let's say you're trying to predict condition and you didn't give it the date of manufacture.
Yeah.
Like, how is it supposed to it might come up with some really good guesses, and
Yeah.
it might get as good as it can get based on all the other factors, but you're not giving it the most important piece of
Yeah.
that equation. So the data is very important, and if you don't have the data, you have to have the knowledge to know what is important and what
Yeah.
you have to. So it all comes back to that.
Yeah. It
um
makes me think of a car. Like you'd want to know what year it's from. Like you can't
yeah.
just sit and say, well, that's a, Toyota Camry. Well, could it be a 1989? Could it be a 19, 99, 2009, 2019? Like there's massive value difference in that. So,
But yeah, what you were saying about AI replacing expertise is like, even if you don't have the massive amounts of data, you still have to have the expertise, the
yeah.
the experience to know what the data should look like or what you're looking for. And that way, then you can pull the right data to feed the model that you're making. But if you have the data already, that definitely helps.
Yeah.
Because you need mountains of it. I mean, if
Yeah.
you always need more than you think you're going to whenever
Yeah.
you're building these kinds of things. You need just mountains and mountains of data. And the bigger it is, the more. I mean, I guarantee Chat GPT's database and all the stuff that they trained it on is mind-bogglingly massive.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it has to learn all the different parts of language and
Yeah.
everything. So
Well, and that's exactly why what we've done over 18 years is accumulate data because we know we have this goal of providing, service and expertise that's driven by data. So again, that goes back to what you're doing with things with Revo and how that platform's being built. The kind of data that we're throwing into there. Um, it's been great. So all I can say, Kobe, after this is hearing Mark talk is I'm glad he's on our team.
Me too.
So yeah, no, Mark, this is great. I think we need to do more of these, and I think this gives our listeners a real look at some of the stuff that's just being thrown about. I think a lot of people don't have a real grasp of people just say, oh yeah, Chat GPT does this or AI is doing this or whatever. But having somebody who understands it and can kind of break it down and tell people like, hey, yes, that capability is there, but you need data, you need the expertise to build it. And that's the thing that what we've done is we've tried to make Merck like driven by data with expertise. So I think it's the best of both worlds. And again, I'm happy to have a guy like Mark on our team. Well, that's awesome. Thanks, Mark. we'll do it again. I think these are need to be recurring and certain themes that pop up, and maybe even listeners can chime in and say, "Hey, what's some of the technology stuff that's going on that we can discuss?" Because I think we learn, even though Mark's a young guy, he's a wealth of knowledge. So let's keep these going.
No, this is fun. I love talking about this kind of stuff.
Great. Well, let's make this one of many. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Kobe. Thanks, Mark. Let's do it again.
Thanks, Mark.
Absolutely.